I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Ms. McNew, you do roll call.
Mr. Anderson?
Present.
Mrs. Cantos? Here. Mr. Hawkins?
Present.
Mr. Jacobs?
Present.
Mr. Ramirez? Mrs. Sullivan-Weiscup?
Present.
Mr. Vanover?
Present. Mr. Ramirez reached out. He is under the weather and won't be with us this evening. All right, council, first thing this evening, we have the minutes from our November 16th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt. Second.
Motion second, discussion. All right, all those approving the minutes as published signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
One abstention. Okay, the minutes are approved with 5 affirmative votes. Okay, Mr. Jones, I guess we'll go to you, or the mayor.
I'll start with the mayor.
Okay.
I just have a brief comment. It's nice to see so many smiley faces out here. And I've said this before, the only time we ever have this many people in the council chambers is if we're going to raise taxes or we're thinking about building a sidewalk in somebody's front yard. And we have neither one of those on the agenda tonight. So welcome to all of you. And I think it's just absolutely outstanding that all of you firemen and women have showed up to welcome your newest member board. So congratulations to all of you for showing that kind of support for your fellow firemen. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. And I guess with that, we too appreciate everyone being here, and we'll turn things over to Chief Stanley and let your fire chief make those introductions.
Mr. President, elected officials, city administration, we're very grateful for this opportunity to come in today and let you meet our newest full-time members of the fire department. We always appreciate the support that you guys give. We're very proud of our fire department, but we couldn't achieve the things that we achieve if it wasn't for all the support that all of you give to us. City administration, we work hand in hand with you on a daily basis. You're very supportive of the fire department. You couldn't have a better city administration in the city. So it's very refreshing, just all the help and the support that we get from them on a daily basis, and from you as needed. So we really appreciate that. And this is definitely a very fun part of the job to introduce you to the new faces that we have in the fire department. We get an opportunity to see their family members, meet them, meet the kids and parents, stuff like that. So it's really a fun time for all of us. So what we'll do tonight is we'll have our 3 captains introduce the personnel that's assigned, their new personnel that's assigned to their shift, and then we'll go from there. So we have Captain Craig Coleman. He's a Unit 1 captain. Brian Losekamp is our Unit 2 captain, and Stephen Sarver is our Unit 3 captain. They're doing a great job in the fire department. We have very good leadership in there. Scott Williams, our new assistant chief, is doing a fantastic job for us. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to brag on them a little bit, if that's okay. Sure. And of course, our firefighters that are the backbone of our department are, very capable individual, very capable men and women in the fire department. They do a fantastic job for us on a daily basis. So I couldn't be more proud of them. So I'll turn it over to Captain Craig Coleman.
Thanks, Chief. Good evening. Like Chief said, we appreciate the opportunity to do this. The fire service is rich with tradition, and this is a tradition that we enjoy to do. I remember when I got introduced to council 10 plus years ago, and it's not forgotten that quickly. So I really do appreciate that, and I know we got a lot of names to get through tonight, so I do have the pleasure of introducing 3 of the guys assigned to Unit 1. With that being said, I'll just get right to it. First, we have firefighter EMT Blake Betcher. If you want to come down here, Blake. So Blake grew up in Harrison, Ohio, and went to Baden High School, and he attended college at Miami University, and he was able to get an associate's degree, and now he is in paramedic school with graduation for that set end of April, so this spring. So he'll be able to serve the department in that capacity very soon, which we're excited about. When he's not working, Blake enjoys going to the gym. I don't know if you can tell, but and when he's not at the gym, he's doing anything outdoors. He loves outdoor activities, and he just likes to spend time with his family. So we're super excited to have Blake on the shift. He does a great job for us, and yeah, I'll let you say thank you, whatever. Yep.
I'd like to say thank you guys for giving me this opportunity to be part of the city of Springdale, and I'm looking forward to a bright future here. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have firefighter EMT Ryan Hughes. Come on up, Ryan. So Ryan grew up in Kettering, Ohio, and attended Kettering Fairmount High School, and then he attended Heidelberg University, which is in northern Ohio, where he received 2 degrees, one in psychology and one in Spanish. And he actually did some overseas time in Spain, I think, 2 years or so. So pretty interesting stuff. He's also in paramedic school with Blake, same class, so they'll graduate same time out of school and be able to serve us in that capacity. So again, excited about that. And when he's not at work, he really enjoys football and watching football and going to football games. Nothing wrong with that. Also likes outdoor activities, and he also enjoys concerts. But you know, paramedic school takes a lot of his time right now, so we're getting him through that. But glad to have him here.
Kind of like what Blake said, I just want to thank everybody in this room. If it wasn't for everybody, the guys behind me, you guys, this wouldn't be possible. I'm just glad to start my career here and, you know, like, and retire here. This looks like a great place to work at.
So last for the Unit 1 guys is firefighter EMT Eddie Hess. Eddie grew up in the neighboring town east of us in Sharonville and attended Princeton High School. So Eddie comes to us with 16 years of experience in the fire service, which is kind of unheard of right now. So we are very fortunate to have that knowledge and ability added to our fire department right on day one. Like, you really don't get that too much. And he has a great working knowledge of the area around us, which we run with a lot mutual aid. And so that was just awesome. It's very nice to be able to lean on him, and he knows a lot about the fire service, so that's good. And Eddie will be starting paramedic school in the spring, so that will, again, take up a lot of his time, but we'll get him through it, and then he'll be able to serve the department in that capacity, which we're excited about. When he's not working, Eddie's a family man, loves to spend time with his family, wife, kids. He likes going camping, and likes to go to his son's baseball games. So, yeah, we're excited to have him. I'm super proud to have all these guys here, so you're good.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and I'm glad to be part of the Springdale Fire Department. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So thanks again for having us. I'll turn it over to Captain Brian Losekamp, Unit 2.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. I've got 2 personnel to introduce tonight. So we'll start with Caleb Lusby. So Caleb's the firefighter EMT. He is in paramedic school, slated to be done in the spring. He comes with 1 year's experience. He grew up in Cleves, went to Miami Valley Christian for high school. And he enjoys to work out and spend time with family in his free time, and recently got engaged. So we welcome him, and he does a good job on the shift. Right. He does a good job on the shift. He's aggressive, brings a lot to the table, and he's always asking questions when he has them. So he's a pleasure to have. So
I just wanted to thank everyone up here for the opportunity to work here, and super excited for the next 30+ years I have at City of Springdale. Thank you guys.
The second individual is Drew Beck. He is on Unit 2. He's a firefighter EMT. He's going to start his paramedic program in 2023 at some point. He comes with us. This is the first job he's worked. He's been with us for 6 months. He started in a part-time capacity, and he's doing a really good job, so we promoted him to full-time. He grew up in Delhi, went to Oak Hills High School, and Drew enjoys to work out, skiing in the wintertime, and playing golf in the summer. And from what I hear, you're pretty good at golf. So he's a pleasure to have on the shift. He's always asking questions. and does a good job, and he's aggressive, so that's what we're looking for. So.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys for this opportunity. I'm really excited. First job in the fire service, and couldn't have asked for a better place to work for, so thank you.
With that, I'll turn it over to Steve Sarver, the Unit 3 captain.
Well, I tried to get Captain Loza Camp to say save the best for last, but he refused to do that. So I'll say it myself. So I've got 3 individuals that are assigned to Unit 3 currently to introduce. First one is Robbie Potter. So Robbie is not in paramedic school. He's actually a paramedic. So Robbie has 14 years experience in the fire service. He came from Liberty Township where he was a career firefighter. He also works in Oxford as a fire inspector. He's president of the Butler County Fire Investigation Team. He went to Fairfield High School, grew up in Fairfield, has an associate's degree in fire science through Eastern Gateway Community College. And what Robbie enjoys spending time with his wife and son outside of work along with his chocolate lab. And he also enjoys playing golf despite not being very good at it. So, I've golfed with Robbie, so I can attest he's not very good at it. And Robbie also has a baby on the way, so congratulations. Come on up, Robbie.
First off, I just want to say thank you. I look forward to continuing my career here at Springdale, and I do want to admit I'm not really good at golf. It is 100% accurate. There's a couple back there that can attest to this too, so. But again, appreciate it. Thank you. Look forward to continuing my career here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Well, the only reason I can say that is because I'm not good at golf either. So, next individual I'm going to introduce is Alex Weber. So Alex is a firefighter EMT. He's going to start paramedic training in the spring of 2023. He has 1 year experience. He worked Springfield Township and also Miami Township in Hamilton County. Grew up in Lima, Ohio, and went to Ada High School. He also lived for about a year in Pittsburgh, but he's not a Steelers fan, so we're okay. Attended Ashland University. He's got a bachelor's degree in supply chain management. He was also a wide receiver for the college football team. And in his time off, he enjoys spending time with his family, hunting, fishing, and other outdoor activities. And he also has a baby on the way.
Yeah, just like everybody else, very grateful to be a part of this wonderful organization. I'd like to thank my family, love the support of them. Just happy to be here. So, thank you.
All right, and the last individual I have to introduce is David Huckleby. David comes to us from Coleraine. He worked there for 18 years, so another individual with a lot of experience in the fire service. He also worked in Forest Park, grew up in College Hill, went to Aiken High School. He enjoys spending time with his family. He's also a fairly decorated boxer and enjoys basketball. And my understanding, David has 2 sets of twins, so I don't really have anything funny to say about that.
I just wanted to say thanks to the City of Springdale Fire Department for giving me this opportunity, and I look forward to a long career here.
Thank you.
So you see what we saw in the interview process. Great individuals, just a huge infusion of positive energy and appreciation for the job in our fire department, which is very refreshing. You know, we lost some experience when some of the older guys retired, you know, so, you know, obviously you lose that institutional knowledge and the benefits that go along with that, you know, but the trade-off is you get just the enthusiasm, the hunger to learn a job, learn a city, and just improve and start their career and just do the best job they can. So we have some gems that we just added to the fire department. We're really excited about it. And again, thank you so much for this opportunity to introduce them to you tonight.
Thank you. Okay. With that, Ms. McNear, do we have any communications this evening?
Thank you, Mr. President. We do have one item from Duke Energy. dated November 30th, 2022, and it's a notification that they're applying for surprisingly a decrease in rates to the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. It will be a decrease that results of 11 cents per month for residential customers. So don't be looking for a check in the mail. But I'm not going to read the whole letter, but if anyone has any questions about it or they'd like to see additional information, it'll be on file in my office. And that concludes my communications. Thank you.
All right, well, we'll continue on. At this point, we're in communications from the audience. Is there anybody in the audience like to address council for any reason?
I just kind of have a question. My name's Megan Chapman. I'm on Vista Glen. Will there be a time later to address the ordinance for changing communications with council, or shall I go now?
Well, the next communication will be post.
Okay. Go now
ordinances.
then, is what I'm hearing. All right. Give me a second to write my name, all that jazz. So I came prepared with something that I wrote myself, so if I'm looking at something and I'm reading it, it's my words. I just wanted to collect my thoughts before I spoke to you guys this time, because in the past I have not, and it has not gone well for me. So here we go. Community participation is a vital part of democracy. I personally have the luxury to attend some city council meetings in person, but there are others in the community who do not. They're busy working, taking care of their families, or sometimes life just happens and they can't make it to the meetings. Or they're like me and sometimes they completely forget that it's Wednesday and there's a council meeting. The live streaming and recording of council meetings has been a fantastic way to allow for community participation. It allows community members to stay informed, but it is a one-way stream of communication. Letters and emails specifically addressed to council that are civil in tone and contain information properly identifying an individual as a Springdale resident should have the opportunity to be read aloud at city council meetings. I know of other local city councils that allow for proxy communications. In the interest of transparency and accountability, it is vital that some form of public comment be available to all residents of this city, not just those that have the privilege to be here to speak. It is not fair to exclude communications from public record just because an individual's circumstances do not allow for them to attend these meetings in person. Instead of looking for ways to limit public participation, you should be looking for ways to improve and expand it. On another, quite frankly related note, I have not felt all that welcome to participate in person at city council meetings. This evening marks what I believe is my third time addressing city council. Both of the previous times I spoke, I distinctly remember hearing someone in the audience behind me say, "If you don't like it here, then move." The last council meeting, that individual doubled down and told me they would help me move. Just to make sure I wasn't missing something, I went back and watched the last council meeting. During this exchange, I also heard a member of council on microphone saying to let it go, essentially allowing the heckling to continue. I have come to council meetings to voice my opinion and ask questions to seek clarification. I am not entirely sure what I have done to deserve the treatment I have received. If I have been out of line or disrespectful in any of my communications with council, I do sincerely apologize. I am human, I make mistakes, I get passionate about some things. But if I am in the wrong or I have caused harm, I will always take ownership and try to make it right. Because that's what good humans do. The way we treat people matters. My first impressions of how the council conducts its meetings has not been the greatest. My experience with my neighbors, the school, and the Springdale community in general have been wonderful. I love it here, and more importantly, my family loves it here. We just moved to Springdale in April of this year. My kids have a bunch of friends that they have met through the school and activities at the recreation center. So, to those that tell me to move, if I don't like it here, I wish to say, I am not moving. Sorry, y'all are stuck with me. I am here because I care. I am here because I not only want Springdale to be the best community for my family, but for everybody that lives here. All this being said, I was a bit taken aback to see the new rate structure for the rec published in the most recent City of Springdale newsletter. I was under the impression that there was still a little bit of time to debate this change, but that was clearly my mistake. For those council members that were at the last meeting, I appreciate that you listened and answered the questions I asked. Since that meeting, I've had a lingering feeling that some of the answers I received from the last meeting were incomplete at best and misleading at worst. For the record, tax dollars paid by the community for a service provided by the community is not giving it away or giving away the service. You do not give away the police and fire services. They are paid for by our tax dollars, and services provided by the rec are not given away either. To say otherwise is misleading. I understand that the rec may not be a high priority for tax dollars. But when I asked why this fee restructuring was happening, the only answer that I got was that we can't rewind the clock. But I really just wanted to know what the catalyst was, like what the specific reason was for this, that put this on the radar and made it our priority. Last meeting, I was asked where I was going to go that was cheaper than the rec. And to that, I will give you the honest answer. I don't have to go anywhere. I can go to my house. I have a pool and a treadmill. I don't need childcare at my home. The only service that I use from the rec is the youth sports, so my kids can play with their friends from school. The whole point of a community, of living in a community though, is so that we don't have to travel all over the greater Cincinnati area to have our needs met. Springdale has the potential to be an awesome city, but that cannot happen if community members are ignored and neglected like the city's infrastructure. My esteemed members of council, this is what accountability looks like, and if you don't like it, then maybe public service isn't the job for you.
Ms. Wisecup?
Thank you for coming out. I've always been very kind to you. I think that you would agree to that.
Yes.
I guess that's what I have the problem with, is because you started off saying that people were mean to you, and I know that you said it wasn't everybody, and I agree with that. In fact, what you were talking about had nothing to do with a lot of us up here, the one part, so I'm not even going to address that. That's irrelevant to me, because that has nothing to do with me. At the end, you said if we don't like doing what we want to do, like what we do for this job, that we should go do something else. Isn't that the same thing that you had a problem with, somebody saying to you? I'm just being honest. I don't like somebody saying that to me. That's rude. It's real rude. Every single person says, you need to be nice to me. And I am so nice to other people. Most of us, I can pretty much say across the board, people here have always been nice to me. We've always been nice to other people. I keep getting told we're being mean. I have never been rude to anybody. I've never been condescending or mean to people. And then when people come up here, they say this. And this is why people get upset in my position, because you're angry. Maybe at one or two or three people, but you're taking it out on everybody. And it's the same thing that you're mad at the people up here for doing, correct? Everyone needs to realize that we're fighting the same fight on both sides. There is no you against us and us against you, I promise. I don't have any problem with you. I don't have any argument with you. I feel like sometimes when people come up here, it's combative towards us. And we've been kind. And today, I felt like you went up and you were calm and everything was fine, and then you got mad. Why did you get mad at us? We've done nothing wrong. I've just tried to do what I can, which is best for the city. I listen to everybody. I read the emails. I look at my text messages. I listen when people call me, just like everybody else does. That's what we're elected to do. Telling me, whether it's you or somebody else that comes up here, that I'm not doing my job, that's not nice either. We're trying to be kind people, just like everybody else is trying to be kind people. I do thank you for coming up here. It's not easy. I've been in your position. I've come here, I've talked, I've been nervous. It's a nerve-wracking position to be where you are. There is nothing more nervous for me than when I was you, coming to council, having to talk to people who are elected and whatever. It is absolutely intimidating. It's even more intimidating when I'm an elected official and I feel like my hands are tied, because no matter what I do, someone's going to call my house, be at my door, yelling at me because they're not happy with what I voted for. We have to do whatever we have to do for every single person. I feel the weight of your worries about this stuff because we have to. That is our job. We have to worry about this stuff. It gets more complicated when people try to tell us that we're wrong all the time instead of coming with any kind of solutions. We're voting tonight on the communications. There's a lot that is in that. There is a lot that needs to be unpacked in that, and I know there's gonna be a lot of discussion. There's gonna be a lot that is discussed. We appreciate everything that everybody has to say, but I think with what you said, I was on board with you, and then the end, I thought, gosh, why did you have to say, if we don't like doing what we do, don't be an elected official?
It's not that, I'm sorry, let me just clarify.
Yeah, please, because I'm honestly, that felt attacked.
It's if you don't, if you're not open to being held accountable.
By whom? By everybody?
By the general public.
Okay,
Yes.
that's fine. We are accountable every single day, whether we're making a decision, whether we're voting, or whether we're not. Every single day, I am accountable to every single person in Springdale. Even though I am just for my district, it doesn't matter. When I vote for you. She is in my district. I vote for her. I vote for him. I vote for me. I vote for every single person. The weight of Springdale is on every single one of us. We're trying to do the best we can. If people are going to be angry at us for trying to do the best we can, and we're not allowed to be human because somebody voted for us, because somebody felt like you are the person who will be my voice, and then they don't even speak to us. Instead, they speak around us and they get angry when we didn't vote the way they wanted us to vote. My phone number has been published many, many times. My address, my everything. It's on the website. It's everywhere. Anybody can get a hold of any of us. Sadly, I get more information from somebody saying, did you hear what was posted on social media? No one ever, by the time it comes to me, it's already been on social media first, so it's already escalated to a frenzy before we even know there's a problem. If people would come to the elected officials before it becomes a big problem, like when it first is, if you came to me and said, hey, Megan, let's talk about this, you better believe I would make time for you. And I'd say, let's sit down, let's talk about the rates, or let's talk about this, let's talk about how it got there. But it doesn't. It gets to a powder cake situation. And all of a sudden, everybody's mad and angry, and it's a problem. Not everything in the city needs to be a problem. We can literally work together, as we have up here before the past and with people in the city. We could do that all the time, but we have to be allowed. Both people need to be willing to open their ears. Just because I don't agree with what somebody tells me how I should vote doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It means I'm looking 10 to 20 years in the future at Springdale, long after I'm not up here anymore. I don't plan on being here for term after term after term, period. That's not what I think I'm up here for. I think I'm here to do what I'm supposed to do and hope that it makes tomorrow better. But if people are are tying our hands today, we can't make tomorrow better. You have to trust us a little bit. I'm willing to go this far, as I hope people are willing to come this far to us. I don't think you meant ill will. I think that you just took, in my opinion, you took that sentence a little too far, because I was like, I'm with you. I feel unity. I feel that you're saying, let's come together. Cool. And then to become decisive in the same sentence isn't helping anybody, just like it wouldn't help if we did it up here. We cannot be decisive. We have to come together and find a way to make this work for everybody. And it's much more than just communication. If you email me, there is nothing that keeps that from being a public record. Anybody can request any emails that are about the city, that are sent to my city email or whatever. So by you saying that when we don't read out loud, it's not public record, that's not true. It's just not true. So if you were to email, that is a public record. And if somebody wanted to request that, they could. And they could request anything that we send in reply as well, so that everybody has the same information. It's hard because you can't at all times have every single person in Springdale know every single thing that's been asked, because you may email me about something and I answer you and nobody even knows it happened, so then not everybody knows that this is happening. There's no way that every single time somebody emails us or asks us a question that we could put it out there and let everybody in the city know about it at all times. It just can't happen. We do the best we can, and I know I'm always willing to do new things and try new things and evolve. But my personal opinion is it needs to be everybody evolving together. Council, administration, citizens, everybody. We all have to work together to make this work. If we're constantly fighting, nothing will ever get done, ever. Because it's going to be a vicious cycle of yuck. That's just my opinion. Thanks.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, Ms. Chapman, thank you for coming out. Community input is important. It's always been important. You can tell by the way that we have things set up with the agenda, where we have 2 opportunities for folks to give input. You can tell by the fact that there's numerous ways to contact elected officials, that it's important. I think where there's a little bit of disconnect in some people's opinions in terms of the ordinance we're going to talk about is around giving input to elected officials and the administration versus someone publicizing their opinion on something. And so those are two different things. You talked about having a one or more not fun experiences coming to council, and I'm sorry if that is how you feel, or that you experienced that. Here's the reality. The ordinance that we have here has taken place in terms of discussion and has been raised over the last month or so as a result of discourse and communication from folks coming into council. Make no mistake about it, everybody wants to have input. You know, we have just under 11,000 people in the city of Springdale, and we want input. And the reality is, you've come to meetings, you've seen, there's not a whole lot of input. You could sit there and watch meetings going back years and years, 2 different opportunities for people to speak. On most council meetings, nobody gets up and says anything, right? So the input's important. Everybody up here has had phone calls with regard to things that come up, but still, it's not an inundation of 50 calls a day or anything like that. So when there's input, it's genuine. People say, we appreciate your input, appreciate you coming through and taking the time, whether it's someone calls, texts, emails, or they come here in person. Folks are happy to answer questions and take input. You may say, hey, did you think about this when you're dealing with this ordinance, or I have an idea about one thing or another? Love to have any of that. The reality with regard to the ordinance that's going to be talked about is really about, in my opinion, for me, 3 things. One, it's about having orderly discussions when folks come in, being efficient in those discussions, and 3, being consistent. And that's important because if people don't feel we're being consistent, then they feel like something's not fair. And we get that. And so really this is about trying to see if we can, in my opinion, manage those things and come out with something that's gonna work. But this ordinance does not limit your access or any of the other 11,000 people's access to anyone on this dais, the administration. It's not going to do that. It's just a difference of if somebody's viewpoint, opinion, or questions is going to be publicized to the masses. And it's not about censorship or trying to say, hey, I don't want you to go. There's other ways to go through and do it. Some of it's about the efficiency of running these meetings and going through this. And again, for the 11,000 people, all of us, I say we, have to be mindful of we're spending money every time we have a meeting, right? We have special staff that's here that's getting paid extra to be here. We have folks that are working overtime to be here. We're paying for this. We got folks running details for us for security. So to just say we're going to have a bunch of people come in and not even address the dais on things that they have an issue, they just want to talk about other stuff that's important for their main objective is to publicize their feelings about something to the general public. There's other ways for them to go through and do that versus come in here and say, hey, Lawrence, I got a suggestion for X, or I've got a question about Y. That's really what we're here for. But you can call, text, email at any point in time, and you will be heard. And there's 7 council members. You got a clerk of council, finance director, and you got the mayor, and then you've got the administration. And some of that's for the ability for you to call whoever you feel comfortable with. You may call 7 people or email 7 people, or you may just call 1 or 2. But you've got not just you, this collective you, has the ability to do that. I think you've heard multiple times from different people. I'm happy to talk with you anytime you want to about whatever it is. If you got a question or a concern, feel free, call me anytime, okay? But this ordinance and this discussion that's been going on for the last month or so really is not about anybody wanting to keep somebody from being able to talk about anything or limit their access, but it's more about what's the fairest way to go about this so everybody gets treated the same way. And, when someone does come here, they can come and do it in a way that they're going to feel comfortable and it's going to be orderly. You should not feel that you or anybody else is being limited to be able to talk with council or anybody at the dais in the administration. That door is open, it's not closing. Whether it's you coming in here, and I understand you got family to go manage, you got work, what have you, and so there's easier ways to go through and do it. You don't have to show up on Wednesday night to be heard. You can call, text, say, hey Lawrence, what are you guys going to talk about on the agenda? Would you guys vote on this? So you have some different opportunities. I just want you to make sure you know that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. President. As plenty have said, I know it's tough to take that podium like you have. Sorry. It's tough to take the podium like you have tonight. I think you did a great job. I didn't take anything you said personally because I know when you've addressed this body, I've respected you and I've reacted to your comments and your statements. I also want to mention, obviously, like she spoke for maybe 5 minutes. Council has taken more than 3 minutes tonight responding to you. I've looked at the ordinance. I understand your frustration. I want people to understand that I think this, taking the podium, is a higher form of citizenship. It's tough. I think we've done not the best job ever being welcoming to people who bring critiques whether it be to administration or council. But sometimes it's about misunderstandings, and that can be frustrating for us. For example, with the fee structure, the members of council didn't have control over that, but the average person in the public didn't know that. And so it was addressed to all of us when in reality that wasn't the true situation. So we could do a better job educating. I think we could be more welcoming to folks, because the whole point of this, there's a podium there for a reason. And for people to come in, and if they want to lob bombs, I think it's our responsibility as elected officials to be above that fray. I don't care about keyboard warriors. I don't care what people say about me as an elected official. I put my name on the ballot, and people are allowed to criticize me. And so I want us to be above the fray. I think that's more than a fair expectation of anybody up here. And the last thing I'll mention is I hope that whether it's frustration with the fee schedule or whatever brought you here tonight, that you take that frustration and focus on going forward, because there's going to be a different rec center. And we all want it to be the best. I've said it before, I'll say it as many times as I need to say it. Everybody wants the best rec center possible. And so I hope you take whatever frustration you still have and just look at going forward and keep being engaged, and I'll do my best to make sure that we're as welcoming as possible when people take the mic. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I know a lot's been said about this comment already, but there was one part I did want to comment on because it broke my heart. I wasn't at the last meeting, and I did watch it shortly after, and it was hard to watch. And I think a lot of that is things that we could do better as a body, and I just want to recognize that. It was very difficult to watch it, not just because emotions were high or there was critiques that could have been handled differently, but it was hard to watch because there was so much crosstalk that was happening in the audience, from the dais to the people. And I do want to recognize that that's a problem. And it's not something that's addressed in this ordinance, but it is something the council is empowered to address. Managing the decorum of the room is important. And I think what we saw in that meeting, at least what I saw, was not acceptable. And having you come back here and tell us that you weren't welcome, it breaks my heart. And I'm sorry that you had that experience. I'm always available for these comments. I go out of my way to respond. It's just hard when people come in and want to talk to us. I feel like they should be welcomed, even if they want to critique us. So I just want to say that I heard that part of the comment. I don't think we responded to that as a body yet, and I think we need to. I don't think that'll be tonight, but I do think that it is our responsibility, either with the gavel or as the body as a whole, to make sure that it's clear that when people are at the dais addressing council, that that's the expectation, and we've talked about rules for that, that you're talking to the body. But that also means that as an audience member, there's a responsibility to listen or at least be quiet. If that person has the floor, they have the floor for as long as they're entitled to it. And we should not be telling people to move because we don't like their opinions. That is completely unacceptable. And I would encourage, if that happens again, that gets immediately addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're still in communications from the audience. Second call.
It's always a reason. Hi, I'm Victoria Morgan. It's always a reason why I feel led. As I've been missing for a long time, but I'm on top of everything that's going on. So for me coming up tonight is for what she just said and for what you just addressed. It isn't right for the audience to have something to say. No matter who you are, you should not attack a resident. It is hard coming up here, speaking when you're out and about, no matter if you are a family member. We should all be kind to one another. It's what I just seen is unacceptable, and it's always a reason while I'm here, and that's what I want to say. When I ran for city council, there was one of the things that I thought that should be addressed was that particular situation that I just saw, unacceptable. So that's all I wanted to say.
Second call. Third and final call, we'll close communications from the audience. At this point, we'll move into our ordinances, and first off this evening, we have ordinance number 34, 2022. It is the second reading. Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 34, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council, finance director to enter into an agreement with CT Consultants for additional design engineering services related to the inclusion of a shared use path for the Northland Boulevard reconstruction project. Whereas the city of Springdale, the city has previously entered into an agreement with CT Consultants for design engineering services necessary for the Northland Boulevard reconstruction project, and whereas the city desires a modification to the previously prepared plans for the inclusion of a shared use path, and whereas CT Consultants has submitted a proposal to perform additional engineering services to revise plans for the Northland Boulevard reconstruction project to include a shared use path. Be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that the mayor and clerk of council, finance director are hereby authorized to enter into an agreement with CT Consultants for additional design engineering services related to the inclusion of a shared use path for the Northland Boulevard reconstruction project to the city of Springdale, the agreement. A copy of the agreement is attached at Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, that the clerk of council, finance director is hereby authorized to pay CT Consultants a sum not to exceed $172,981 for engineering services associated with the agreement. Section 3, council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 4, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
All right, council, you've heard the reading of ordinance 34, 2022. It is the second reading and can be enacted upon this evening. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Motion second, discussion. Seeing no lights, Ms. McNear, your poll council.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mrs. Gantos? Aye. Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Ordinance number 34, 2022 passes with 6 affirmative votes. And next up, we have ordinance number 38, 2022. This is a second reading. We did have some additions from the last to this. So we'll go from here. Ms. McNear, if you read the ordinance, please.
Ordinance number 38, 2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 30 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances governing procedures at city council meetings. Whereas the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, council has previously adopted certain rules and procedures contained in Chapter 30 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances related to the manner in which council meetings are conducted. And whereas council seeks to promote informed and transparent public participation at council meetings. And whereas in furtherance of these goals, council seeks to amend the rules and procedures related to the council meetings. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, Section 30.05L of the Springdale Code of Ordinances shall be adopted to read as follows. 30.05L, members of the public shall be entitled to speak during communications from the audience for a period of no more than 3 minutes unless granted additional time to speak by the president of council or an affirmative vote of a majority of council. Section 2, Section 30.05M of the Springdale Code of Ordinances shall be adopted to read as follows. 30.05M, citizens' correspondence that is received by the Clerk of Council, Finance Director, shall not be read at council meetings unless it constitutes official business upon which council is required to be informed or take action. Any signed citizen correspondence containing a return mailing address that is received by the Clerk of Council, Finance Director, that is not required to be read at a council meeting shall be distributed to members of council along with any response that is provided. Section 3, that this council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 4, that this ordinance shall be effective from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
All right, council, discussion. Mr. Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. President. My first question is just total procedural before we charge ahead with this. And part of the comments I've already said. As president of council, it's my understanding that that gavel can be used to establish decorum. And that decorum doesn't matter in terms of what's being said at a podium or what's being said anywhere else. And so after the last meeting, I think a lot of us felt frustration is how can we avoid that ever happening again? And I think at the end of the day, it's not about language. There's no language in here about that. But we have to establish decorum. It cannot be acceptable. I don't know what world where it's acceptable where a citizen comes up to that podium, critiques council, and they're heckled by the crowd. There's no world where that should be okay. We can't be okay with it. But it all rests with the gavel. And so I think we need to establish that we're going to create decorum in this room. It has to be that going forward, because some of these problems are because of that issue. And so that's my first comment. My second comment is I'd like the body to consider a change of language in 3.30.05, section L. The additional time grant of 3 minutes, I'd like to suggest that we change anything after by a president of council or an affirmative vote of a majority to a member of council. If a resident hits that podium and one of us elected officials wants to hear more, I don't think it should take 4 votes. We've been elected to take these seats, and whoever hits that podium is one of our constituents. And I trust all of my fellow members of council to be able to say, hey, give them a few more minutes. Because as we just saw, the resident spoke for maybe 5. Council responded at least 7, 8, 10 minutes. So I'm not worried about time. We want accountability. We don't want somebody to filibuster what this body's doing. And as Mr. Hawkins said, we have to be pragmatic. The podium could be abused, but I'd like to see any member of council be able to extend that time. I also have a micro concern about the word entitled to speak, as I mentioned before the meeting began. When the resident hits the podium, does the clock start? Who's counting the time? And what I don't want to see is that a resident walks up there, talks for 45 seconds, asks a question, and then one of us responds and eats up the 3 minutes. I think we have to be clear to residents how that's going to play out, because we're creating a specificity here. And that specificity is 3 minutes. If I'm out there, I want to know, when does the clock start? If Mr. Jacobs interrupts me with a question, is that eating my time? I don't think it should eat the time. I think it should be 3 minutes to speak, not 3 minutes of our time. And that's not in the ordinance, unless we say it is, at least in my opinion. The other items, I don't notice in section M, where it says the letter will be distributed to members of council. It doesn't say administration. I don't think we should assume that, unless everybody appears comfortable with assuming that. So I thought that was kind of missing. And then I had a suggestion from a resident. This is my final of the 3 points I wanted to bring up. A resident suggested as a middle ground, if a resident wants to address council, they can't be here, they send an email. I agree with Mr. Hawkins that this body isn't then required to be the megaphone for that email. I think that's perfectly logical. But I think a middle ground could be that that email is published in the minutes. And I think that avoids grandstanding. I think it is a way where whatever that citizen expresses does end up in a record for everybody to see without the grandstanding element that could be abused by sending the email. So those are my 3 suggestions. I want to clarify the 3 minutes. I think any member of council should be able to extend time. I'd like to see administration added to the language as well. Thank you.
Well, I want to cut in here because there's something that I'm a bit confused myself. Mr. Braun, we had looked at well, basically addressing the decorum section. Well, on mine, it was section 330.05N that spells out president of council or other presiding officer reserves the right to rule out of order, disruptive, threatening, profane, abusive, slanderous, and otherwise unprofessional conduct of any council member or meeting participant that impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. Any person determined by the president of council or other presiding officers to be violating this rule or engaging in conduct defined in RC 2917.12, which obstructs or interferes with the ability of council to conduct the meeting, may be ordered or ceased engaging in the offending conduct. And if they continue, may be removed from the meeting by the president of council or other presiding officer. Mr. Braun.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was under the impression that that had been circulated to council. As you'll recall, I read that in the last meeting as a suggested amendment to be included in it, and it was in my copy, but my copy might be different than your copy. So yeah, as a result of incidents that could occur and have occurred at the past few council meetings, I was suggesting that 30.05N be included with the language that you just read as part of this ordinance that governs procedures at council meetings. One other point I wanted to make, and I don't know, do other members of council have that typed out? I'm happy to read that again if you want to hear the language. Would you like me to read that again a little slower?
I would like for you to read it.
And again, I apologize. It read, the proposed language is 30.05N. It would be section 3. The president of council or other presiding officer reserves the right to rule out of order disruptive, threatening, profane, abusive, slanderous, or otherwise unprofessional conduct of any council member or meeting participant that impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. Any person determined by the president of council or other presiding officer to be violating this rule or engaging in conduct defined in Revised Code 2917-12, which obstructs or interferes with the ability of council to conduct the meeting, may be ordered to cease engaging in the offending conduct, and if they continue, may be removed from the meeting by the president of council or other presiding officer. So that's the language that I had proposed be amended and included in the resolution. I might also suggest, Councilmember Jacobs had suggested that questions that are asked by members of council should not count against a speaker. If that is the will of council, I would propose adding to 30.05L an additional sentence which reads, "This time shall not be inclusive of questions asked of speakers." That way it'll be clear in the future to future councils that questions don't count for the 3 minutes.
Okay. Mayor Webster?
Do you want to take any action on his motion first or not? Or-
Well, I think that we've got enough that needs to be addressed that we'll continue with the discussion. I think for benefit of everybody here that then we will do another reading with the amendments in it so that everybody has a chance to read it and see it. But
Okay, the reason for my light was, I had a question for Mr. Jacobs. You bring up emails. Don't you think that's covered when it said citizens correspondence? It doesn't specify it has to be a letter. Couldn't that be interpreted as a letter or email?
Mr. Jacobs?
My comment wasn't intended to differentiate between the two. My point is, if a citizen contacts us in whatever format, what we're saying is we have a consistent policy, which I think a lot of us we're on board. We either read letters or we don't, and there's a lot of logic to not reading the letters. I don't know any opposition to that. But my point is, if they send a communication, couldn't we reach a middle ground that then we just throw it into the minutes? But I'm not sure that's what you're asking about. Like, I didn't differentiate between letter or email, or I didn't intend to with my comments.
So you're not suggesting that we read that email?
Never. No, I've never said that.
All right. Because
and I think we're all on board on that.
Somebody sends an email, you really don't know who it came from.
I feel like we've all kind of reached agreement on that. And I don't want to speak for others. I'm saying that in past discussions, I've said that it's not our mission as this body to be the megaphone for every email that's sent. I've said that multiple times. So I'm not. Like I said, my goal was to find a middle ground. Resident sends the email. No, we're not going to read it. But why not throw it in the minutes? Because that doesn't cost a dime, and it avoids any possible grandstanding. That was just, like I said, me trying to find a middle ground.
Ms. Gantes?
My questions are of a very practical nature. So who would be the timekeeper? And how would they be keeping time? And then it says they can be granted additional time So we give them a 30-second warning, and they say, no, wait a minute, I don't think I'm going to be done in 30 seconds. I think I need another minute. Can you guys vote if I can have another minute? I'm trying to see, I'm just imagining how it would play out. And then we stop and we vote. Yeah, you can have another minute. And then people are talking, and then we do want to engage with the person more, and that's going to take some more time. It seems like there is going to be a problem keeping that 30 seconds and you're out of here, How would that work? They could get some more time and we would vote. I don't know, I'm just playing it out like it's a movie.
Well,
I'm trying to think somebody's speaking and.
let me say this, it's up to the president, the presiding officer first. They can decide, yes, we will allow more, no, we won't.
At that moment, so 3 minutes is up and then you're gonna say yay or nay.
Right, they can say, I've got a couple more points. Okay, well, how long? Is it another 5 minutes? Is it another 2 minutes? That type, we can make that arrangement.
So we wouldn't be necessarily voting, it would just be on a case-by-case
Right.
basis.
Right. As it presiding, and as far as the timing goes, that's something that we're going to work out. Quite honestly, I told Mr. Jacobs, it can be as simple as a 3-minute egg timer, the old hourglass that you set. It's a visual, everybody sees it, and go. We don't have to get elaborate timing systems or whatever. At some point, if we redo, the mics and that stuff, then, maybe work it in, or we come up with a more simple solution, that's fine. But I don't think it's too difficult. Probably the timekeeper will be one of two people right here in the middle, either Ms. McNear, which I'll lay on her, or myself. I'm the presiding officer. That because my first and foremost job is to run the meeting. And if you've spent any time at all, you know that I'm the last to speak usually. And that's because of that. I'm not here to first call interact. I have that voice, but my first responsibility is run the meeting. That's what this 3005N gives me definitions and a process. Not picking on anybody, but I had my ears chewed because I didn't gavel down. I didn't have rules to gavel down. What do you gavel down when there's no procedure to do that, short of, fisticuff or whatever? We have officers present here, but this is, everybody's wanting procedures and, even the playing field, and that's what my drive for this is. We define, how it's going to be treated. We define what is acceptable and non-acceptable, and that's, from this point going forward. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. And couple things. One, picking up from some different amendments to this, I like going down into that 30.05M and making sure that we state that the item shall be distributed to council and administration, just so that it's in there. Not to say that it wouldn't be, usually administration is going to get it initially, but it's good to spell that out in there. I think it's been sort of discussed, but the idea of adding the 30.05N language and having another reading for us to all to see that firsthand with how that interacts with that would be good. On 30.05L, I think it's also important to add in there a sentence at the end that indicates that the communications from the audience all communications from the audience shall be addressing the dais only, so that it's clear that if someone comes here, they're coming here to speak to the elected officials or the administration with whatever issue questions they have. But I would like to see that language added in there. Along the lines of some of the discourse we've had in terms of keeping order and President Vanover's last comments, I think there's a dichotomy, and it's important in the last, 2-3 meetings we had, and people have talked about what's been said at the dais, and folks have talked about what's been said in the audience. And it's important from the president's standpoint, there have been some limits on what we don't have with regard to what's said from the podium. I think some of what you're hearing, Mr. Vanover, in terms of some critical comments, constructive criticism, is around the audience, right? So I think the president is always empowered to control the audience. We've got the podium. It's important that the person that comes to the podium has the opportunity to speak. And so that's one thing. And there was some talk, I think, over the last couple meetings from folks reading letters or whatever else, where there's been some people saying, well, should have gavelled the person at the podium. I don't think that was necessarily the case. We didn't have legislation to monitor that. But we always have the ability to monitor and manage folks in the audience if they're talking or over-talking an individual. We've had that, issue from different factions at different times. So again, in terms of fairness, regardless of whoever's speaking up there, and they may have a different viewpoint than somebody else, but we want to make sure that person's protected to speak and uninterrupted. So I think through Robert's rules, whatever else, I think the president is always empowered with regard to that in terms of making sure everybody else in the gallery is allowing that person to speak. I think overall we are moving in a positive direction. I'm happy to see that. I think it's going to be good for the city because it's going to be good for the folks that are on the dais and running the meeting. And, I think with a couple of those changes with regard to 30.05, adding the administration, 30.05L, making sure that all comments are to the dais, adding the 30.05N with regard to some additional language for the president to manage. I am in favor of the idea, as Mr. Jacobs is indicating, empowering council to be able to extend somebody else's time. I think the way that President Vanover has described the idea of, someone's time runs out, how much more time do you need, so that it's not just an endless thing, but there's an expectation there I think is an appropriate way to go about it. I also like the idea of there being visual cues for everybody. Again, that's sort of a fairness thing, so that there's not well, I only got 2.5. I feel like I got cheated in this. So if there's a visual cue, that's great, whether it's something that goes up on the board or it's an egg timer or it's an hourglass. I think that's an excellent idea as well. Thank you.
Mayor Webster?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think the hourglass answers Mrs. Gaines' first question. Second question is, how do we go about extending the time? I would think that, I think that's covered pretty well in here. First off, the officer in charge has the first responsibility to do that. And if he's unreasonable and says, no, you don't get any more time, I would think that if any member of council disagrees with that they hit the button and it's debated on whether, okay, yeah, this person should get some more time or not. So I think, but let's face it, how many times have we wanted to quash somebody at that podium? I mean, I look back over the years, maybe a handful of times, somebody gets up here, but nonsensical stuff, and it's not directed to the dais like Mr. Hawkins suggested. It's just rambling on and on, or they're here to promote, self-promote an event that benefits themselves. Or Mr. Matiglia wants to take us a task on the goldfish swim. I mean, that was a fiasco. You know, I think in that case, Mr. Vanover just arbitrarily put a 3-minute time limit on him, thank goodness, or he'd probably still be up here talking. But I mean, so we're talking few and far between that this would be invoked. I would think if somebody's up there making good common sense, that whoever's in charge of the gavel is not going to gavel them down. If they need more time, you give it to them. But somebody's up there, like I said, self-promoting, nonsensical. The man with the gavel has the authority to gavel them down. If somebody on council disagrees, and then you debate it, give them more time.
Mr. Jacobs?
These are micro decisions. First off, I'm glad we're going to be having a second reading because I've only been here for about a year. I'm not a big fan of changing language and then voting that night. It's not that I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. It's just I choose not to when I can, especially when we're going to do something that could affect our residents. But a micro question, the way the ordinance is read, it has to be a vote to extend time unless the chair does it. So a few minutes ago, it was said that it wouldn't always be a vote. Now, unless chair extends the time, it has to be a vote. And that's why, and I understand the mayor's points, but every member up here was chosen by those folks. And I don't know any of us that would let somebody ramble on. But if somebody genuinely walks up there and they can't get their thoughts out in 3 minutes, and either their district rep or an at-large rep thinks they should have more time, to me, it doesn't have to be complicated. We could simply say, Mr. President, I request that the speaker gets 1 more minute. I also acknowledge that as the president, he can decide how many minutes. If he extends the time, I have no concern whether he picks 30 seconds or a minute. There's the power right there. And I also want to interject a quick question to Mr. Braun because I'm still troubled by this extra language. Because in my head, based on what we saw at the last meeting, the power was already there because at a certain point, the podium was no longer used to address council. It was used to address members of the audience. To me, that's a violation of decorum. It's a violation of good order. I was very frustrated at that meeting because I didn't think any extra power was needed. When the person at the podium starts talking to other members of the audience, that's out of order. And then I'll turn that into a question. Is it not, Mr. Braun?
What I will say about that is, I think Robert's Rules of Order does give certain powers of the presiding officer to run the meeting. I think the reason that we need, though, the language that we're talking about is that you never want to see that power executed arbitrarily or inconsistently, and I think that the language that we're proposing and that we'll see in the third reading will make sure that it's not arbitrarily enforced. I also think I heard at least 2 members of this council say they were frustrated by what they saw. Well, this will give you the ability to say, you know, Mr. President, you have the power to do that. It's profane, threatening, you know, whatever. And so I think it's very clear. But you're right. I think Robert's Rules of Order gives you a certain amount of discretion to do that. And I think these amendments will take care of that. The only other thing I wanted to make clear is, just remind you, I guess, is that I would request that someone make a motion at some point when you're ready to have a third reading with the proposed amendments. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is to Mr. Jacobs' point about whether there should be a vote or how that would work. Someone asked, I don't think it was Mr. Jacobs, how that would work. And I've seen it twice in my 22 years of doing municipal work where, as the mayor said, they refused to give someone additional time to speak because the president of council wanted to shut somebody down, but yet a member of council wanted heard. Both times when they voted, everybody else said, yeah, go ahead and give them the time. I would remind you, though, that you have to empower the presiding officer to have certain powers to run the meeting. And then if they fail to do it the way the remaining members of council want, that's when council gets to act to say, yeah, go ahead, we'll let the ship pass through. So I would just remind you of that. That's the reason it's written the way that it is. I think anytime you start giving every single member of council the ability to run the meeting, I think you open it up for potentials of it unraveling. But I think this has that safeguard of, okay, we don't like what the president of council did, we'll just vote to go ahead and allow it. That's the only reason it's worded that way, but obviously you have the power to do it how you want.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a different topic question. Did we finish that out? You can come back to me if there was other comments on that first. Should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay. I had a question about, first, thank you for those clarifications. That's exactly what I was looking for in terms of Robert's Rules of Order. It's already enshrined. And the reminders that Mr. Braun gave, I think, are excellent. So thank you for that. The question I have is around 3005M, when we're talking about correspondence. I feel like I got two different answers during the discussion about what constitutes correspondence. Some of this language seems very directed towards physical mail, physical letters, when you start talking about return mail addresses, signed messages. In the digital age, and we talk about keyboard warriors, is email, text, and correspondence all treated the same way in this section? I'd hate for people who are comfortable communicating with email to be excluded from contacting us using these same methods. Is email, text still considered return mail addresses and signed as long as they're electronically signed, or do we need to address that separately?
Mr. Braun?
I think, you want me to point it out? Mr. Yule just pointed out to me, I think we can solve that problem. It's intended to address all. And again, I'm not the best when it comes to drafting for the modern age, but if you take the word mailing out, I think it solves your problem. Just says return address. That would apply to email, solid address, anything.
And to be clear, just so we have it, that we're all on the same page for that, when we talk about signatures in that case and return address, so a return email address would be just as valid as, or are we expecting residents to type a physical address in their email too?
I think address could be an email address, any signed citizen correspondence containing a return.
So that opens the question about citizen. So we use the word citizen and resident in different cases.
We did intend to use, actually, now that you're mentioning that, I think our point was to verify that they're a resident or that we knew who they were.
Well, I think it's important that we need to address that
Why don't we do this?
language.
Why don't we look at that language, and I understand the intent you're talking about. In the next iteration that we send around, I'll try to address that, to say maybe you need, to say the correspondence should include a means to verify or communicate back. We'll come up with something.
And I would like, and maybe it's an administrative policy then that would come after that. If that's fine for the language that we're talking about for the ordinance, but I feel like that we might need an administrative policy to go with that, especially as the clerk moves into an administrative role after next year. I'd hate for communications from residents to get lost because they didn't know the rules or the secret word to use inside that email. So if we're going to keep it broad like this to be all-inclusive, to be more open to communications, I'd like to see at least a commitment from administration and the clerk in the meanwhile that if they receive a letter that isn't properly formatted, that it won't just get black-holed, right? Especially if it seems like they're trying to communicate. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like there needs to be something policy-wise to go along with the ordinance. If somebody didn't write their address in an email and we want a physical address to verify they're a resident, we should have a practice to verify, not just ignore. At least that's what I would like to see happen. If we're not going to do that, then I can't support the ordinance because I want to make sure we're open to those types of new rookies. Does that make sense?
Well, and I'll...
Yeah, and that's our discussion. It's not a decree. I'm curious.
Part of that is getting into the anonymous letters.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I don't give a whole lot of credence to that because if it is important and it then gives us a way of reaching back out, what do? Go to your Facebook page and say, well, whoever sent me this letter, I think that we're all, whether it's email, text, written, I think we've all reached the knowledge level at, okay, this is important to me, I will identify. People come in, we ask them to sign in and put their name down. So if it comes in as an anonymous letter, I think it gets treated just as that. Because how much time and effort and money are we gonna spend running this down? Are we gonna call Next Step and have them run the IP number down?
Yeah.
I think there's a point where we have given them 6 lanes to get to us. And if they want to be in that, on the shoulder and the curb, then there's not much we can do. You know, I understand, I'm not trying to cut anybody out, but if you took the time to write the letter, but then didn't put your name on it, that I can reach back out, and I've had 3 or 4 this year about that. Who do I go? It comes resident, Springdale. What am I supposed to do with it? I do take the time to open it and read it, but there's what action do I take?
And I understand that. I guess it seems like it's at times inconsistent. I'm trying to think through the scenarios we've had in communications in practice in the past. I take your point about anonymous. I guess I also look at, in some cases, administration, in some cases, administration has responded to requests from anonymous emails, concerned citizen of whatever, even though there wasn't a physical address in that. And in other cases, like Mr. Hoff's letter, I know there was a comment several meetings ago where we weren't even sure if we were going to respond to that letter because he only signed his name and didn't put his address on it, his physical address. It had a return email address, and it had a name. So I guess, and I'm not being critical, I'm not trying to look to the past and say, gosh, wag your finger at it. I want to make sure we're clear going forward how we're going to handle it so it's done consistently, because that's what we're trying to do. And maybe it's not just in this ordinance, maybe it's something that goes along with the ordinance. If a policy doesn't make sense, maybe it's something that this council can do as part of the PR subcommittee to create a job aid or a how-to guide that we can put on the front page of the website. So you want to contact your administrators or you want to send a letter, just know that in order for you to get a response, include these things, right? Because unless you happen to dial in and tune in at this meeting, I don't know that everyone would assume that if I send an email or text that I have to sign my text message with my physical address. And I want to make sure that those forms of communication are open for people that are comfortable doing that. I know I've gotten way more text messages and emails than I have physical mail. I've gotten some of each, but it's exponentially different. All of those comments I feel are valuable. I've gotten good, and I've gotten some of those anonymous letters of, man, you're a slob, or what are you thinking, you know? We've had some of those read at this council meeting. So I understand that. I'm just wondering if there's a way that we could make it clearer for the residents. And I appreciate the language change. Maybe we can look at that. I'm glad to hear electronic communication is treated the same way. But I would like for this body to do something to make it clear to residents how to get their response that they're looking for, because I don't think it's clear.
Well, I mean, we've got the webpage. We can outline, you know, a 1-paragraph procedure. If you are, you know, we post our email addresses, we post our phone numbers. To me, you put that there, that's probably the common environment that, you know, they can get to. And we do that and just say, you know, effective, whatever we pass this, ordinance 39 or whatever, 38, then it is, here's the change.
But we would expect, if we pass this as written, or at least as will be amended, we will expect as a body that an email and a text message, if they want a response, they need to include their physical address at the end of that message. Is that what we're saying?
Mr. Braun?
Because contact information isn't, right, contact information, a text is a response text, an email is a response email. A physical matter needs physical mail.
Mr. Braun?
As a procedural matter, I just want to remind everyone, this only relates to citizen correspondence received by the clerk. So anyone can still text a council member anonymously, email a council member anonymously. This is only official correspondence that is received by the clerk and how that's handled under communications during the meeting. So this has no impact on the ability of residents to anonymously contact any of you, or that it's going to fall into an abyss if they email a member of council. This is only official correspondence that goes, in this case, to Ms. McNear to be, quote, read at a council meeting. This is the criteria under which and how they'll be handled. We will go ahead, though, and address, as you pointed out, I think it's a valid point. We want to make sure that if there's some way of verifying or information as to who the author is, we'll come up with some language and we'll insert that in there. But I did want to remind everyone so we don't get off the path that this is only limited in M to correspondence that's sent to the clerk.
Ms. McNear?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just would like to put out there that I would like to see physical address when, whatever the communication would be, because we're not going to, to address the letters that are coming from someone who lives outside of Springdale. This is for us to take care of the Springdale issues. Now, letters would still be read, like I read tonight, the letter from Duke. This is informational to everyone who lives here. But I think it's important that we know, are we dealing with a resident or not? Sometimes we get things from, anonymous people. It's very, in this world that we live in today, where communication is pretty quick, easy, and simple, it's really easy to hide behind the anonymity of social media and throw whatever out there that people want to throw out there, be it true or not. You can't respond to those things, especially in the positions that we have up here. Now, I know Mrs. Sullivan-Weisskopf talked about, people being angry down there, people being angry up here. For the most part, people up here will not say anything because they're trying to be respectful to people in the audience. There are times we're plenty angry because, you know what, we signed up for this, so we have to take a lot of guff that, the people out there who want to say things, whether it's true or not, don't have to. Our families didn't sign up for that. But everybody up here is up here because we love this city too. And we have devoted our time, decades of our life in some cases. We didn't start up here. We didn't have a coup. And we just said, this is my desk. I'm going to be here. We started ground roots in this city. We worked on SOS. We volunteered our time. We worked on PTA. We've been coaches. We've done all these things that people that are coming up in this city are doing, and that's great. We need people to continuously move up, up in this, and perhaps they have aspirations to be up here, but there's a way to do it. But we have to work together. Let's face it, we are not Washington, we are not Columbus, we are your neighbors. You see us at the store. We are the same people who went through Princeton School District. We sent our kids through the school, through the recreation center. We've been coaches. We've been your neighbors. You're going to run into us in the grocery store. Let's afford each other respect. And I mean truly respect face-to-face, respect on social media. If you have a problem, we want to fix it. We truly do. And it's not that we're trying to hide any letters. We don't have anything to hide. Anything that goes on is a public record. Anybody can request it any time. So, I don't understand why it's a problem that we say, if you're a resident, we want to fix your problem, tell us who you are. We only know who people are if we know them because they live on our street. We've been interacting with them at the rec center, at the PTA, or whatever. I don't think it's a problem to say, who are you? Verify who you are. Because it's just like, we've had people from outside the city. Why they have interest in what we're doing is beyond me. And it costs the money, it's the city money. Frankly, every time someone requests a public record, it costs the city money. It costs money because we have to have our internet service, our server people, they're pulling everything. We have our attorney has to look at things. We have our administration working on, it costs the city time and money. We're not trying to hide anything. Everything is an open book here. So I want to, I wanted to put that out there. It's been something it's been percolating in my mind for a while, because it does get frustrating to us up here too, because we're trying to do the best thing that we do. And it is a job, Frank. Yeah, it is a job. The people in this city put us up here. Some of us have been here for a very, very long time. Guess what? Nobody's running against us, or the people decided to put us back up here. So, work with us. If you have a problem, be respectful. We're not up here cursing people out. We're not being mean to people. But I'll tell you, I've read a lot of things that aren't very complimentary. And the other thing I think people need to understand too is communication is so quick anymore. Instantaneously, you can communicate to people. But you have to understand too that, except for the people on that far end, these are all part-time positions. We are not going to be able to respond instantaneously, because other than those of us who are retired, people have full-time jobs. I know that it's been mentioned too, people can't be here because they have other responsibilities. I totally understand that. We all have those same things too, but we've dedicated our lives to doing this. I mean, we all miss our spouses' birthdays, our anniversaries, our own birthdays, our children's ball games, their concerts, excuse me. We miss all those things because that's what we signed up to, because we love this city and we made a commitment to do it. So if you have a question, we want to hear it. We truly do. This is not lip service that people are up here saying it. Every single person up here has said, we really want to hear what you think. Honest to God, it is the truth. We do want to hear it. But we do want it to be reasonable, and we want it to be respectful. And that's what all this is about. It's unfortunate that in this, at this small city, this 6 square mile city with 11,000 people, that we have to put all these rules in place to be able to treat each other kindly. And in this holiday season, perhaps we should all look internally to ourselves and say, perhaps we should just be a little bit kinder. Look at what we have been through in the last 2 years with the pandemic. We've been through a lot, and I think we all just need to be a little bit kinder and work towards that. Thank you for listening to my soapbox this evening.
Ms. Webster, or Mr. Webster.
Well said, Mrs. McNair, well said. For someone that occupied that seat for 24 years, I received numerous letters over the years, unsigned, and at that point, they made it in a trash can. Now with public records, you're not allowed to do that, but I would, I'm sure that Mr. Knox, in his 12 years in that office, said the same thing. You get an unsigned letter, you don't waste anybody's time. If it's not important to sign it, then it goes into a file and that's it. And I would think that going forward, that's exactly what we should, we should do that. I don't think we should waste time or publicizing instructions on how do you get a reply to your. Well, if it's not that important to you, then don't write a letter. If you got something on your mind, you want to say it, fine. Write us a letter, an email, whatever, but sign the thing. Tell us who you are. Don't. Well, anyway, I totally disagree with trying to reach out and instruct people on how to get a reply. It's common sense, and so anyway. I've got one other document. I'd like to read some numbers here, and I'd like this to put it in the record. Debbie, I'll give you a copy of this. But when you guys first started talking about trying to limit time for people to talk and so forth and so on, I asked John, Mr. Jones, to reach out to some other cities, neighboring jurisdictions, to find out what they did. Because I'm a firm believer, why try to reinvent the wheel? Let's see what other communities have done in this regard. So, Mr. Jones did that. He went to the Center for Local Governments, surveyed 26 respondents, and here's the excerpts from the survey. Question, what time limit do you put on citizen comments during council meetings? Well, 4 of them had no time limits at all. 2 of them had 1 minute. 8 of them had 3 minutes, 2 of them had 4 minutes, 9 of them had 5 minutes, and 1 it was the discretion of the president of council, and 1 failed to respond. Second question, do you require advanced sign-up notice advising council that you're going to be there? Well, 19% said yes, they do. The rest of them, 57% said no, and 21% made them fill out a card once they arrived there. Number 3, do you allow dialogue on the floor of council between members and the public? 34 said yes, 19 said no, and the other one said it's up to the discretion of council. They listen, but they do not respond. Do you provide responses in writing? Nobody did. 40% yes. The other 60 said the majority refer to the administration handle case by case. So Mr. Jones went one step further and he contacted 9 neighboring jurisdictions, being Monroe, Sharonville, Trenton, the Princeton School Board, the City of Wyoming, the City of Blue Ash, City of Eaton, City of Loveland, and the City of Fairfield. And this was on November the 4th, and the responses were, do you have a procedure in place for correspondence sent to the clerk of council? Is the recommendation acknowledged or read in public? Yes, but no. The no's or respond to no answers. They do not. They have a procedure, but they do not read it in council. 9 for 9. Do not read it. Do you have a time limit for individuals who want to speak to council? Fairfield, Loveland had 5 minutes. Monroe, Princeton, Blue Ash, Eaton had 3 minutes. Sharonville, Trenton, and Wyoming had no limit at all. So I think what we're doing here is certainly not out of the ordinary, and it's not uncharacteristic for a city or village or a school board to want to have some control over the dialogue. Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, the main thing I wanted to highlight, which Mr. Braun touched on with that 30.05M, is we're not talking about things that are coming to council. We're talking about things that would go to the clerk of council, finance director. And so, you know, I doubt that Ms. McNair's been getting a bunch of text messages coming through to her from that vantage point. But in terms of us as individuals, yes, people communicate with us via text and email and whatever else. The only other thing I'd say on that 30.05M is really that's about letters or correspondences that go to the clerk of council, finance director, and one, if they're going to be read out loud. But I think part of the discussion that's been focused on as being important is them being circulated to members of council. And as we just talked about with the suggestion that Mr. Jacobs had, and to the administration. I think in most instances, we're probably going to get our hands on that if there's an issue where we should. The idea of people signing it, putting some type of means for us to correspond back with them is important for us to be able to correspond back to them. I don't particularly have an issue if it were not a physical address. I think that makes it a heck of a lot easier. An email, a phone number is something, but obviously the more information, the easier it is for us to reach back out to them. Some of what we've gone through discourse-wise, and I've asked for a phone number of one individual because they didn't put a phone number on a letter. And I've asked other individuals that have corresponded with that individual, that they didn't have that individual's number. So it's kind of like if you have the intention to want to get feedback, then present a means to get feedback by giving a way for one to get back to you. And some of that, you know, I think it's a great idea to put on the website. There, it's going to be self-explanatory if it's on the website. But some of it is kind of a thing that you would think would be obvious. If I send a correspondence to somebody and I want a response back from them, I need to give that individual a means to be able to correspond back to me. And, you know, we can go from there. But the main part was, as we're having that discussion, Mr. Braun touched on it, it's important to remember this is about what would be going to the clerk of council finance director, not necessarily just to us. Thank you.
Mr. Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. President. I look forward, obviously, we're going to have a bunch of changes with the new language. So there's only, so many times we can talk about this tonight, but I want to clarify one thing. If we are creating a policy that says you have to have your physical address, I think Mr. Anderson was just asking that we make it clear. Nobody up here is defending anonymous letters. None of us say we want anonymous letters read out loud. None of us say we want anonymous letters treated any certain way. I haven't heard anybody say that. But if we say it has to have an address, I don't think it's a big lift to put on the webpage. When residents reach out to administration or the clerk, please include a physical address if you wish a response. That doesn't cost a dime. So I can't imagine that being some kind of barrier for us. So I think instructions make sense. I think if we're going to change the podium, I think we also should have a handout as people walk in. You'll be allotted 3 minutes unless given more time. That doesn't cost anything, and it's fair because we're changing the procedure. So I don't think it's holding anybody's hand or doing more than we need to. If residents think we're not welcoming, we could prove them wrong by how we behave going forward, and that's what I want to see us do. Beyond that, just to briefly mention it, because I don't see a lot of support for it, but I have no desire to run these meetings. So if a resident goes past the 3 minutes, I mean, my concern when I said it should be a member of council that could add more time, I don't want all the heat to go on the president. If a resident is up here with a beef, I think the best beef would be to their district member, not to just blast it all onto the president. And I'm not asking to run the meeting. I'm saying if one of us thinks they need more time, I don't think it should have to come to a vote. If there's not support for that, then there won't be support for that. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate Mr. Hawkins' comments, and Mr. Jacobs did echo what my response basically to my questions about address. My concern is I've heard a few different answers to that question, and I want to make sure that I know what to expect when we do the next reading. In 3005M, we talk about citizen correspondence. In other cases, we talk about residents. If we're going to restrict it to resident communications to council, or to the clerk of courts, then we do need some sort of address to verify that, which is why I wanted to make sure it was included. And since that is a new thing, it's something we should help communicate to our residents that, hey, that if you're going to do an official communication through the clerk, that this is the format that's expected. And the reason I say that is because it's not obvious. Look at our recent communications. Even the one from Mr. Hoff, which I felt was a valid email that was sent in. It was an email. It had his name and an email address in response. It did not have his physical address. I don't think that's unusual. And I don't think it's a fair expectation for people just to know that. And the idea that a message like that would just be shunted and not responded to, I feel is a little dismissive of a resident who might have concerns to give. So I'm not being critical of the past. I'm saying moving forward, if we're going to require physical addresses, we have a responsibility to make sure that's clear, and I'm asking for us to do that. I'm not trying to say administration fix stuff or do things. We have a PR committee. We can create a handout that we can put at the front of the dais, as Mr. Jacob mentioned. I'm happy to do heavy lifting in that space, but I want to be consistent. If the ordinance says citizen, we should be talking about all citizens, not just residents, in which case an address doesn't matter, because out-of-state people would have those same rights. If it's residents, then we need to verify that somehow. That's all. So I would look for those changes in the next reading, but just know that I'm looking for clarification on that. And return mailing address, if we're going to assume mailing address is physical, I feel like we need to say that in writing, because I think a lot of people today will think an email address is a return mail address and would be valid then.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. Along the lines of a lot of the discussion we've had, I think it may be helpful for Mr. Braun going forward. It seems like there's a lot of consensus on most things. The one thing that I haven't heard a consensus on from folks on the dais going forward is how folks feel about the suggestion made by Mr. Jacobs with regard to, can any member of council also extend time for a speaker if the president were to decide not to, versus having a vote on it. So I think if folks at least can give their 2 cents with regard to that to move forward so that Mr. Braun can be clear on what version of this document we get next time, I think would be helpful.
Mr. Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. President. Along the lines of a lot of the discussion we've had, I think it may be helpful for Mr. Braun going forward. It seems like there's a lot of consensus on most things. The one thing that I haven't heard a consensus on from folks on the dais is how folks feel about the suggestion made by Mr. Jacobs with regard to, can any member of council also extend time for a speaker if the president were to decide not to, versus having a vote on it. So I think if folks at least can give their 2 cents with regard to that to move forward so that Mr. Braun can be clear on what version of this document we get next time, I think would be helpful.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think that it's part of the presider's responsibility, and the fact that we have a relief if there is abuse with a point of order or calling for a vote, I think that's sufficient to have that check. I don't want to over-legalize, like litigate this. I feel like the presider has that responsibility to run the meeting, and as long as there's the opportunity to call for a vote if we disagree, I feel like that's sufficient. At least that's when I voted for you as president of council. One of the primary reasons was because you ran a good meeting. I know we've had challenges, but that's the role. So I wouldn't want to subvert that. I think we have a relief, and I think that's in there. That's my view.
Ms. Weisskopf?
Thank you, Mr. President. I was literally going to say the same thing, is that because we have that one part that says that if for any reason we don't agree with his ruling, that we can in fact speak up and say, I want to hear more or whatever. I hear what you're saying, like, I hear what Ms. Gantos was saying of, do we stop it and then vote? Because does that stop the flow of conversation too, is what I was worried about. Because I know that sometimes ADHD or ADD in my mind and stuff like that, if I'm going and then I have to stop what I'm thinking and have a vote, and it's hard to get back into the frame of where I was when I was first talking. So there were a lot of things with that one, but I understand if it's a quick thing where if the time is up and if for any reason President Vanover says, we're done, and I'm like, whoa, I want to hear more of it, I can then say, push my button and say, I want more. And then will it be like an immediate vote? Like that's it's like immediate, no discussion, just here's what we go? Because I want to make sure that that's also clear. Is there discussion? Is there not discussion? Because I don't want to get to where if he says, no, it should end, and then I say I should stay, and then someone else go, why do you think they should still talk? I just want to make sure that everybody is on the same page going completely forward so that there's not another 10-minute discussion later on about what are the procedures of that phase of it. Do you know what I mean?
I do, that's what I meant.
Yeah, that's where I'm thinking.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I assumed that it would be based off of what is in Robert's Rules of Order. You would call for a vote to extend. Just by that, you just say, point of order, call for a vote to extend time, and at that point, the presiding officer has a responsibility to act on the motion that's on the floor right then. And as part of a normal motion, there's an opportunity for discussion, and that's all spelled out. So I don't think it's a new procedure. It's just we're empowered to make that, and we're just setting that expectation. I don't think it would happen. Like, it would be a pretty unusual situation, but your comment about would it break the flow of the conversation, just understand what would have already happened at that point. Right at that point, the presiding officer would have already said, your time's up, thank you, move on to the next. So at that point, there's already been a pause. It's not an interruption. And then you're not interrupting either speaker at that point because he's already paused or he or she was already paused and say, point of order, I'd like to call for a vote to extend that person's time. Unless I'm mistaken, that's my understanding of the process. Right? Okay. I had one other question too, if I could, unless you want to wait till later.
No, go ahead.
There was a comment made about it's a public record. I've heard a lot of discussion and feedback from residents about that idea. One of the reasons that people have been trying to help me understand the concern about why they want it written on the record, why they want it read into the record. It's a public record, I feel, is a tough answer to that. Yes, of course, if somebody sends an email in and it gets received by the clerk, we handle it just like we would a public record. The challenge is that the public at large doesn't know that that record exists. And the process for requesting records isn't discovery, right? Even though some people feel like it can be used for like this mallet for discovering what's happened, like a legal system, it's not. You're requesting a specific record. And because that letter is never read or included in the minutes, the public at large wouldn't know to request that record. So I feel like there's still a gap there that needs to be addressed. I don't think it has to be addressed with this. I support the idea of correspondence having guide rails, and I do think it's important that we set expectations for the dais, but I don't think just saying it's a public record is enough. I feel like there's something else we can do. We don't have to do it with this, where maybe we publish quarterly, hey, these are the official correspondences we had by title. Maybe we use an updated section of the website that's being put out there to share that information. These are things we can do to enhance communication instead of close it. Again, we don't have to do that tonight, but I think it's fair to set that expectation for residents that just because we're doing things tonight to limit or put some rules around what's happening, it doesn't mean that we can't do those other things Now, I'm not asking administration to sign up for that tonight, but I'm saying that I think it's a fair question the residents have, is how do I know what's been responded to? And I think we can work on that. Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Point of clarification, Mr. Braun, do you need a official motion to amend this document then going forward?
I've been taking notes, and Mr. Yule's been taking notes. I think we have a pretty good understanding. So what I'm going to propose is that we bring that amendment back as a third reading, and then there could be potentially some tweaks to that. Once those are made at that next meeting, we can move to amend to reflect the version we'll circulate, if you're comfortable with it. I would ask, though, again, when we conclude our discussion tonight, that somebody make a motion that the ordinance as presented be continued for a third reading. One other point I just want to make for Mr. Anderson, I would remind you that not all unsolicited transitory communications that we receive are public records. So unsolicited letters are not kept by the city. Anonymous are never kept, so just be aware of that.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I think that's important. I do appreciate the clarification, but we need to be helping the public understand what constitutes an unsolicited correspondence that we wouldn't treat as a public record. If we're saying with this update to the ordinance that a signed email is not unsolicited, is now a valid record, that's fine. But if we're saying it has to include an address, a physical address, I think that's an important distinction. And we can look at the new language and see if that's clear next time. I have one other thing I'd like to add to it, and maybe it's just me put off for discussion, is the time. I heard Mayor Webster talk about the polling that happened with other communities and their times. I was struck by the fact that so many had 5-minute times as opposed to 3. I think in the spirit of we're kind of dialing this in, maybe we take one of those less restrictive times out of the gate and pick the 5 minutes instead of 3. We haven't run into those clocks before. I feel like it sends a better message that, hey, we're trying to set limits to be responsible, but we're not trying to silence anyone. So I would like to see a 5 or 10-minute limit, because it's Springdale, we're not the city of Cincinnati. We're just trying to stop the abuse of it. So I don't know what other people think about that. I feel like 3 struck me as, that's really tight.
Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd be in support of 5 minutes.
Council concurrence? Mr. Braun, you have? All right, well, then, I understood you to ask, you want a motion to continue? Okay. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to continue this ordinance for a third reading in our next meeting with the amendments we discussed.
Motion second, further discussion? All right, Ms. McNear, you pull motion for continuance.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mrs. Gantos? Aye. Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Ordinance 38, 2022 is continued until December the 21st. Okay, with that, next up is ordinance 39, 2022. Ms. McNear, when you're ready, it does include the emergency clause.
Ordinance number 39, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council, finance director, to amend the agreement with CT Consultants Incorporated to provide engineering services for the city of Springdale and declaring an emergency. Whereas professional engineering services are required by the city of Springdale, Ohio for various ongoing projects in the city. And whereas CT Consultants Incorporated is qualified and has performed engineering services on behalf of the city, and whereas it is the desire of council of the city of Springdale to continue to utilize the services of CT Consultants Incorporated and needs to amend the city's agreement with it to reflect the updated cost for services to be performed beginning January 1st, 2023. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that the mayor and clerk of council, finance director are hereby authorized to amend the agreement with CT Consultants Incorporated for engineering services to be performed on behalf of the city of Springdale as reflected on the schedule attached as Exhibit A, excuse me, and incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, that the Clerk of Council Finance Director is hereby authorized to pay CT consultants according to the rate set forth in the schedule attached as Exhibit A beginning January 1st, 2023. Section 3, that this ordinance shall be an emergency measure, excuse me, necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, excuse me, and shall subject to the terms of Article 2, D3D of the Charter.
The reason,
Stop. There you go.
the reason for the emergency is the need to provide compensation to CT Consultants Incorporated according to the attached amendment effective January 1st, 2023, without interruption to the ongoing projects within the city past this day, 2022.
All right, council, for the reading from two voices of ordinance 39, 2022.
Move to adopt.
All right.
Second.
I have motion second, discussion. Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. In the letter that's attached, I just wanted to point out in the next to the last paragraph that the proposal is not an increase for the fee schedule for cities, projects, or services. As opposed to that, it's, or instead of that, it's proposing an increase for fee schedule to perform plan reviews as requested by our building department. And if I may add to my last comment is, it's very consistent with surrounding jurisdictions, the requested change.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just going to say I've enjoyed having Mr. Riggs join us this past year, so I hope that we continue to have him with us for another year.
All right, I don't see any more lights. Ms. McNew, your poll council.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Sullivan Weiskopf?
Aye.
Mrs. Gantes? Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Ordinance 39, 2022 passes with 6 affirmative votes. And next up, we have ordinance number 40, 2022. It likewise includes an emergency clause. We are doing 2 readings with this. We will have a public hearing on the 17th, I'm sorry, the 21st. So this essentially is the first reading tonight. Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Okay, here goes.
Yeah.
I will. Ordinance number 40, 2022, an ordinance amending various building inspection fees contained in the Springdale Code of Ordinances and declaring an emergency. Whereas the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, Council has previously adopted building inspection fees which are discussed and contained in Chapters 93, 123, 151, 152, 154, 155, and 156 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances. And whereas Council seeks to adjust the various building inspection fees and the regulations related to them. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, Chapters 93, 123, 151, 152, 154, 155, and 156 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances shall be amended as reflected in the attached Exhibit A, which is incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, that this council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, that this ordinance shall be effective from and after the earliest period allowed by law. Section 4, that this ordinance shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, and shall, subject to the terms of Article 2D3D of the Charter, be effective immediately. The reason for the emergency is the need to begin charging the applicable building inspection fees according to the attached amendment effective January 1st, 2023.
All right, discussion. Mayor Webster.
Yeah, just would like to emphasize what Mr. Vanover said. We're not asking you to pass this tonight. We want the emergency clause in there so that, assuming you pass it on the 21st, it would still go into effect first of the year.
Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just for the administration, the fees that we have listed here, we use the consortium for, city government to compare and contrast where we're at with these fees compared to some other neighboring communities.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. Correct. Our building department did some in-depth research in comparison to surrounding jurisdictions and so forth. In addition, I want to add that, too, keep in mind this is for building, not residential. I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. But yes, to answer your question, Mr. Hawkins.
And we end up sort of in the middle, or?
We are still on the lower end in almost every category.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Jones, you befuddled me there. You said this is building, the building code covers both commercial and residential, correct?
It does, but these fees that we're referring to is not an increase in the residential. We're talking about the building, or commercial, rather. I'm sorry. Commercial, not residential.
Well, I will state undeniably and clearly that this is, in my opinion, long overdue. I won't bore you with horror stories of dealing with other agencies, inspection agencies in the county, but suffice to say the last 2 years have been being kind of challenge dealing with some of these. So this brings everything in-house. Our residents will benefit greatly from the increased and improved service, and take some headaches out of their life in dealing with the building department. So that's my piece. All right, with that, we are at Resolution R22, 2022.
Resolution number R22, 2022, a resolution confirming the mayor's reappointment of Rita Hart to serve another term as a member of the City of Springdale Board of Health for the term ending December 31st, 2024. Whereas the mayor has announced the reappointment of Rita Hart to serve as a member of the City of Springdale Board of Health for the term ending December 31st, 2024. Now therefore be it resolved by the council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, with members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that Rita Hart be and is hereby confirmed as a member of the City of Springdale Board of Health for the term ending December 31st, 2024. Section 2, that this resolution shall take effect and be enforced from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
All right, council, I've heard the reading of Resolution R22, 2022. What is your pleasure? Motion second, discussion. Mayor Webster?
Yes, I'd like to speak to both this and the Resolution 23. These are two long-term members of the Board of Health. As a matter of fact, they predate me as a mayor of the city, and I think they've served. I'm not so sure that Mr. Kedry wasn't appointed by Mayor French. That's how far back he goes. So they're both long-term and very productive members of the Board of Health, and I would urge your support for both of those folks. It's a 2-year term.
Okay. I don't see any more lights. Ms. Meany, your poll council.
Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gantes? Aye. Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Resolution R 2022 passes with 6 affirmative votes. Next on deck is Resolution R 23, 2022. Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Resolution number R23, 2022, a resolution confirming the mayor's reappointment of Kevin Kettering to serve another term as member of the City of Springdale Board of Health for the term ending December 31st, 2024. Whereas the mayor has announced the reappointment of Kevin Kettering to serve as a member of the City of Springdale Board of Health for the term ending December 31st, 2024. Now therefore be it resolved by the council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, with members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that Kevin Kettering be and is hereby confirmed as a member of the City of Springdale Board of Health for the term ending December 31st, 2024. Section 2, that this resolution shall take effect and be enforced from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
All right, council, I've heard the reading of Resolution 23, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion second, discussion. Seeing no lights, Ms. Meany, your poll council.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gantes? Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Resolution R 23, 2022 passes with 6 affirmative votes. Before we dive into R24, I have been advised that Mrs. Cheryl Darby is interested in continuing on the civil service, but I will open the floor for nominations. Mr. Hawkins?
Move to nominate Cheryl Darby to the Civil Service Commission.
Second.
Motion second. Any other nominations? We'll close nominations, and by acclamation, we'll read 24, 2022 with Cheryl Darby's name.
Resolution number R24, 2022, a resolution appointing Cheryl Darby to serve as a member of the City of Springdale Civil Service Commission for the term ending December 31st, 2025. Whereas a vacancy will occur on the City of Springdale Civil Service Commission as a result of the expiration of a current member's term which expires December 31st, 2022. And whereas the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio has determined that Cheryl Darby shall be appointed to fill the vacancy and serve as a member of the City of Springdale Civil Service Commission for the term ending December 31st, 2025. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that Cheryl Darby be and is hereby appointed to serve as a member of the City of Springdale Civil Service Commission for the term ending December 31st, 2025. Section 2, council hereby finds and determines that all former actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, that this resolution shall take effect and be enforced from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
All right, council, for the reading of Resolution R24, 2022, what is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion? All right, I will just add from comments from Mr. Coleman that Ms. Darby is a integral and very much appreciated addition and our continued presence on that board. So, all right, with that, Ms. McNear, you poll council.
Mrs. Sullivan Weiscup. Aye. Mr. Hawkins.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mrs. Gantos. Aye. Mr. Jacobs.
Aye.
Mr. Vanover.
Aye. Resolution R24, 2022 passes with 6 affirmative votes. At this point, we're in old business. Is there any old business to bring before council this evening? New business? Ms. McNear?
Thank you, Mr. President. I did receive an email from OKI via Mr. Anderson. He was in receipt of an email that came through requesting board nominations for this year. This is a new procedure for the OKI. We have always received a paper request, and normally the selection is not due for several more weeks into December, but they have asked that we respond by yesterday. So obviously, we were not able to make that time frame, and I did leave a message to let them, the OKI group, know that that was the situation here, as well as Mr. Anderson did contact them too to let them know that we would be discussing it this evening. I also wanted to note that in the email communication, there was something, and I'm going to quote the numbers, it's not going to be exact, but somewhere around 150 organizations were sent this email, but only about 40 or 50 had responded, obviously because they didn't get the information either. So Mr. Anderson has agreed to represent City of Springdale on this board again, unless anybody has a burning desire to take over.
Speak now, forever hold your peace.
You guys are missing out. We're going to talk about bridges. We're going to talk about multimodal paths. We're going to talk, well, it's also a lot of money for Springdale. Don't forget, we got like $3 million from OKI for the Crescentville Road work. I mean, it's important. I'm happy to do it again, but if other people want a chance. Daytime meetings, bridges, no?
All right, Mr. Anderson, by acclamation. Mr. Anderson, you had discussion point?
I had another item for new business.
Sure.
It's a possible rule that I wondered if council might want to adopt or look into. I was at the Parkdale Library a couple weeks ago, and I noticed A couple of Forest Park residents were looking at their ordinance board that they post over there. Forest Park, as a matter of practice, puts their agenda and the full ordinances that'll be before council in the public library ahead of time, like the Monday before their meetings. I'm not saying that we have to use the Parkdale Library, but with recognizing that administration does get requests for ordinances, and maybe we should just start posting them as a matter of practice at the rec center, at the community center, on a board there the Monday before meetings, just so people have an opportunity to see the full text of what we're evaluating in this meetings. The reason I thought it occurred to me is it was surprising to me. There were 2 Forest Park residents looking at an ordinance, and they were looking at the detailed language inside of it and talking about it, having a discussion about it, trying to decide if they wanted to talk to their elected officials. I thought that was great. So I know we don't post ours publicly, but I wonder if we might want to start doing that at the community center, just on the board the Monday before.
Comments? Ms. Weisskopf, put that on this? Okay.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Did they also have, like, you know how we have exhibits and things like that? Is everything included or just the original text?
Oh, from what I saw there when I've got in there, it's been the full ordinances with attachments on the board. Now, I don't know if it's the full attachments, but some of the ordinances were hefty, so it seems like they're posting the same thing that we're getting. I don't know, I think it's a great message that, hey, the community center is the place to get information about the community. We can use one of the boards there just to post the ordinances. Since we're not really publishing like in newspapers, really, I mean, other than what's required.
Mr. Yule.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're moving towards a digital packet to make those available for the general public with some website upgrades here. We anticipate that coming forward in the next couple months to do a public-facing packet, a full packet, a digital packet available for their review on Monday prior to a council meeting. So that's the intent that we're working towards. We're only probably a couple months away from that going live. So if that helps kind of push the message out there or make available all those documents with the exhibits, may be beneficial instead of posting a complete packet, but I don't know if it addresses what it is you're envisioning.
I think that certainly captures a big population. I do note that our general population it's young and it's old, and I wonder if people might want it in both formats. I do think the electronic packets is a great move. I love that. If other people would be interested in physical packets, I think that's still good. I don't think it costs us much time, and it's just another effort to show transparency, which I think is a great message to be giving right now.
Mr. Jacobs on this topic?
Yeah, just a quick question. So a couple month timeline maybe for the packet or for the website upgrade?
Yes and yes.
Great, that's
So
fantastic.
it's all going to roll out together.
Love it.
There's some coding that would have to go on with our existing website to make that happen, and we're not too far behind when that would occur to roll out a revised website that'll be a little more interactive and provide some more opportunity to get notifications and engage.
Thank you.
To Mr. Anderson's point, where I waiver on hard copies, when like we have a public hearing and a presentation, and especially if it's recommendation coming from planning, we have plots and all that, it can get very cumbersome. That's, and especially if, we're going to maintain dual processes, that I don't have any problem with doing the ordinance, but some of the other stuff, pay tables, I waiver on that, we know, but putting fire department's pay table out there, I think we're bordering on some not good position.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are public records too. I get that. And maybe it's just the ordinances that we post, right? It's just the text of the ordinances without attachments, which would then give people the opportunity to request the attachments if they want. I can't imagine that would be much of a burden. I do take your point about the planning commission with all the plots and diagrams, but I think the ordinances and resolutions being posted, I think is a great way to encourage engagement.
Mr. Yule?
Thank you, Mr. President. We're trying to move towards a lot of the things that you're saying, and maybe we look into the availability of maybe making that agenda available at the community center and having a QR code attached to the specifics for the different resolutions and ordinances as something where people could go and it will direct them, point them back onto our new website as well. There's a lot of, I think there's a lot more functionality that we'll have moving forward.
I love all of that. I just think it should be additive, not in place of. I think it's great. I was just trying to help my mother-in-law with QR codes the other day. I don't know that that's an answer for everyone, but I do like the idea. I think the website's great. I just think it should be in addition to, at least for a while. If it turns out that, you know, no one's using it, you go there every time, you never see anyone talking about it, we can revisit. But this is council's decision, I feel like we should post it. It's not a secret what we're doing. We should just post it.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you. Mr. President, I agree with the idea. I don't think it takes too much to put the agenda down and the ordinances, even if it doesn't have all the attachments, just for folks to be able to see. And I think it's awesome what we're going to have in terms of electronically, and if there's a QR code to direct them back, that's fantastic too. But it'll give somebody something tangible to look at, thumb through, and may pique their interest to dig further with what we've got going.
Well, then, I guess a directive, you want a consensus of council to the administration on that? Okay.
I mean, if you'd like to make it a formal rule, we can create a rule. It's what do you want to do? I don't. If you people want to think about it and talk about it next week, that's fine. Or in 2 weeks. I just want to put it out there. I feel like it's an easy, low-hanging fruit we can deal with.
Council? Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess the only thing I would like to caution everyone with is our agendas do change. We may tell you on Friday, here's your packet, and thank you, pick it up, it's available for you. And on Monday, I get a call from Joe Braun that says we're going to need an executive session. The reason why I bring that up in particular is obviously things like that happen. But in addition to that, sometimes things that are put out by the city, like the Parks and Rec or something like that on an event, we may cancel that event due to weather, but the message was put out on social media other than by us, and people don't know the event got canceled. So I just bring that kind of thing up, that things change, and sometimes they change and not everybody gets the message. So I realize it's, you know, if we do it on Friday and it changes on a Monday, it's not that hard for us to go back and fix that. But if it changes Wednesday afternoon and Mr. Braun says, I need an executive session this evening, well, that's going to be added to the agenda and so forth. So other than that, I guess from an administrative point of view, I don't have a big issue with that. But I just need to remind folks that those things do happen. And that's a real live example, or real realistic example I gave. We had people frustrated with us that events were put on social media that we didn't put up, but they felt they showed up for an event that had been canceled.
But we're talking about ordinances for our council meetings,
Right.
not all notices. And maybe that's a good point, is that maybe we need to put a disclaimer on whatever board we're using that says, as of this date, always check the website for the latest, and kind of drive people to the website, because that's what we want to encourage, right? So a simple disclaimer is, I think, a good call out. But the ordinances, those don't, I mean, if they're changing on Tuesday for a meeting Wednesday, that's a different problem.
No, the ordinances per se wouldn't change it, but the agenda certainly could. So, yeah, thank you.
Mr. Hawkins on this? Or another topic, okay. All right, concurrence of council? Mr. Jacobs?
Sure.
Okay. You've got it. All right, Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had asked, and I'll ask again formally, this evening, if Mr. Braun can look at our section, I think 73.04, with regard to handicap parking, and just making sure that we're up to date and we don't need any modifications made for our enforcement. So I just wanted to make sure I publicly had said that, and I already spoke with Mr. Braun, but I want to make sure council was aware I made that request.
Mr. Braun?
Yes, I'll just confirm that I sent myself a note so I don't forget.
Okay. Meetings and announcements.
It's not lighting up on it.
Mr. Jacobs?
Apologies, Board of Health will meet tomorrow adjacent to these chambers at 7 o'clock.
Ms. Weisskopf?
I'm losing my mind. Planning Commission will meet in these chambers next Wednesday, the 12th at 7 p.m.
Okay. All right. At this point, we're back to communications from the audience. Is there anybody in the audience like to address council for any reason? Second call.
Julie Matheny, I'm a resident, 669 Park Avenue. I noticed earlier in the lengthy discussion on the Code of Council rules that Mr. Jacobs and Mr. Anderson spent a great deal of time saying how appalled they were at what they had heard at the podium the meeting prior and from the audience. I was just curious if you two were as appalled tonight when you read your minutes and you saw where Mr. Huff said that the mayor is no better than a common criminal, common thief.
Mr. Jacobs?
I mentioned this already, I've spoken to it. In my opinion, I'm sorry, I moved it out of the way. Once you take this seat, I expect the public to be disappointed in me and lob stuff at me. I'd like us to be above that. So I'm not sure if you're looking for some equivalency,
No, I'm asking you if you were appalled. Are you appalled that a public servant for over 50 years who has served this city and his family has, that somebody comes up here and accuses him of being no better than a common thief? Does that not appall you, Mr. Jacobs?
well, I feel like you're coming at me right now, you want me.
Well, as you said,
I'm trying
you put your name on the ballot, and you're up there because I took my name off. So you got to take heat too. If we got to take it, you got to take it. Welcome to politics in Springdale.
I was in the process of answering your question. Do you not want me to answer your question? Well, you left the podium, so I don't know if this is a discussion anymore or just a statement. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Second, Mr. Yule?
Sorry, Mr. President, I do have one thing to add. The rental program committee will be meeting on December 14th at 1 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Yule.
Sorry
I knew
about
I was
that.
forgetting something.
Okay, we're at second call. Third call. We'll close communications from the audience. At this point, Mr. Hawkins, will go to you for an update on legislation still in development.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you review your internal memorandums, item number 1 was addressed with ordinance number 34, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council finance director to enter into an agreement with CT Consultants for additional design engineering services related to the inclusion of a shared use path for the Northland Boulevard reconstruction project, and that passed the 6-0 vote. We had item number 2, which was addressed with ordinance number 38, 2022, an ordinance amending chapter 30 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances governing procedures of city council meetings, and that was continued to the next meeting with amendments, and that was with a 6-0 vote. Item number 3 was addressed with ordinance number 39, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk of council finance director to amend the agreement with CT Consultants Incorporated to provide engineering services for the city of Springdale and declaring an emergency, and that passed the 6-0 vote. Item number 4 was addressed with resolution R22, 2022, and R23, 2022, confirming the mayoral appointments to the Board of Health with regard to Rita Hart and Kevin Kettering, respectively. Both of those passed the 6-0 votes. Item number 5 was addressed with ordinance number 40, 2022, an ordinance amending various building inspection fees contained in the Springdale Code of Ordinances and declaring an emergency. That was a first reading. Item number 6 and 7 and 8 were all forthcoming. Item number 9 was addressed with Resolution R24, 2022, which involved an ordinance appointing Cheryl Darby to the Civil Service Commission, and that passed with a 6-0 vote.
And we have forthcoming Charter Revision and Tax Review Board will deal with it at this meeting. Mayor Webster?
Yes, and I will have a resolution for council confirming someone of the Plan Commission at the next meeting.
All right, staying with Mr. Hawkins, recap of legislative items requested for our next council meeting.
We will have a third reading of ordinance number 38, 2022.
Mr. Jones?
I'm sorry, Mr. Hawkins can keep going, but I'm sure he'd like to remind folks up here that he'll be reviewing the Finance Committee's recommendation to council with regard to the budget. I'm pretty sure he was going to mention that.
Of course. So we will have a third reading of ordinance number 38, 2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 30 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances governing procedures at city council meetings. We will have a second reading with regard to ordinance number 40, 2022, an ordinance amending various building inspection fees contained in the Springdale Code of Ordinances and declaring an emergency. We will have adopting the final appropriations and transfer ordinance of 2022. We'll have an ordinance adopting a temporary appropriations ordinance for the period of January 1st, 2023 until the fiscal year of 2023 appropriations permanent ordinance is adopted by City Council. We will also have an ordinance setting the employee pay rates for 2023 and declaring an emergency. We will have additional appointments, resolutions for confirming appointments with regard to various commissions, including Planning Commission, and we will also go over the budget for the 2023 for council's approval. And that's it, unless there's anything else from council or the administration.
No, looks like we're covered. Administration, we good? All right. Item 15 before us.
Move to adjourn.
Council's adjourned.